literally, therapists are just giving you a space to unpack, a space to take it all out and lay it out so you can see it. Sometimes you haven't even seen it or don't know what's at the bottom of the suitcase. You've never had the space to unpack.
We've been talking around it a little bit and mentioned it a couple times. So let's talk about it.
What do you want to know? What do you want to know? Some of them I am still processing.
Bro.
Some of them are like still
here. I hope so. I hope so.
Oh my God. Okay, before we actually get into it, let's talk about what we got here. This is a book by Poetic Moment. It is called More Courage Than a Few. Has it been officially released yet, or is it still in pre-order?
Officially, yes. Technically, it is available. If you were to get it through me, then it would just come with like stickers and stuff like that. But yeah, it's available on Amazon right now. But yeah.
Yay.
That's kind of crazy.
I know it is.
Talk about the artwork on the cover.
Okay. I love this because there are so many weird stories about this book that I feel like people just need to know. Okay, so I did not have a single idea about a cover. I will be honest. I only had the words. And I wanted to find somebody unique. The only thing that I knew was the color. I knew what color I wanted the book. I wanted that particular color because that color feels like something rustic and something that's been in your home a while and something that you forget is there and then you see it and you grab it. Think of like your yearbook. You ever see like your old high school yearbook, you grab it and next thing you know, 3 hours later, you're still flipping through it. I found this artist and I told him, look, I have no idea what I want this book cover to be, but here's your task. I said, I want you to read this manuscript front to back in one sitting. And then I want in one sitting, I was very deliberate in one sitting. And then I want you to create and sketch 3 different designs after you've read it. Whatever it is that you feel, whatever it is that you think, that's what I want you to do. And ironically, this is a straight heterosexual white man from Arizona. So I was like, I don't know how. Right? If that puts it into context, though, because I don't know how he came up with that, right? So the first 2, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And then there was that draft. And I was like, let me see where you go with this. And he was like, all right. So he went crazy with it. And by the time he was done, I actually found the exact line in my book that inspired that. And it was, I lay in a king-size bed full of skeletons, hopeful the dead will burrow inside me. And he said that line, he said that line just hit him and he was like, I gotta sketch that. And that's it. That is it. I had no ideas and he came up with that, which is why it's huge for me because I'm all about artists having their own platform. Like I'm big on collaboration, but I'm big on like artistic integrity. So it was like, look, I want him to have full ownership over what he did for his cover and I will not take credit for it because this is what he saw and the words are what I feel. So that
I love that about art. Your words like filtered through him. He produced his own art.
Right.
Like, so see that same picture and then make a song that was inspired by the picture. And it's just this, I love that. I love that about art.
Yeah.
Mental health is a big theme and motif throughout all of this work with childhood trauma and just trauma in general, but mental health. And there was a line that I underlined that I was just captivated by. So the line that I underlined was from the piece Therapy for Black Girls. And there was a line that says, me going to therapy is a problem according to my mother, a debt, and then there's a big space rather than an investment. I think that's something that people just growing up in Black and brown households can just relate to all over.
Right.
With older generations, I feel like it takes some unlearning of where they've been to be like, this is something that you can help you and can better you and that you should invest in.
Right now, the way we reference someone going to therapy is the same way we reference that cousin who's in jail. Like we don't really talk about it. It's a thing that we know is happening, but the fact that he's in jail is a problem. We won't talk about what got him there or all surrounding it. So we just don't even talk about it. So it's the same thing. We acknowledge that therapy is a place that you might end up having to go to, but the fact that you have to go is seen as a failure on the community that you come from, and just how we change the stigma around that.
Exactly. And not even just on like our elders, but like our actual parents. So like for me, therapy was my mother admitting that she did something wrong. Like that's how she viewed it. Like, oh, you're in therapy, so I must have failed. And that poem was really trying to get her to see that's not the point. Like therapy is not about you. It's about me. It's about who I'm going to bring into this world. And a big portion of it is her trying to see that, hey, I am doing this for my future daughter. I'm doing this for my future son so that I do not make some of the mistakes that you made, or that I've learned from some of the things that you've done. And I don't blame my mother for everything. I don't blame her for anything, to be quite honest. She had to grow the same way that I did. She probably could have been better off if she had therapy. But again, the cycle continues, especially if we go backwards. So for me, it was getting her to understand that therapy is not the enemy here. And neither are you. It is a space for me to communicate. And that is all it is, because I do not feel that Black people can communicate the best, right? A lot of it is rooted in our judgment. Like my mother is afraid that she will be judged by other family members because her daughter's in therapy. And it's like, that's not what it's about. We should all be focused on healing, understanding our past traumas, understanding the things that have happened to us, and not focused on blame. And I think that is the biggest thing with our elders, is they just feel like we're blaming them. And it's like, I'm not blaming you. I don't have it in me to blame you. And if I did, I wouldn't be in therapy. That's the biggest thing. If I was still in the blame phase, I wouldn't be in therapy. Like I'm not in that space to do that. And I try to get older people, especially with that poem, because I know a lot of older Black women, they love it when I recite it, but they have a hard time when they read it. So I'm like, look, it's interesting. I think they hear the love when I speak it, but they feel the condemnation when they read it. And it's like, look, you got to change the narrative and how you're viewing it. Like I've encouraged my mother to read it, not from the position of me writing it, but read it from the position of her childhood self saying it. And she has taken a minute to like, okay, let me read this poem as if I was the younger version of me talking to my mother. And it's totally different if you read it that way.
And it's so fascinating because I know that there are varying levels of trauma, childhood experiences, things that you're going through as an adult, and unpacking that. Speaking about, you had that one where you told your therapist, we're not unpacking this today.
Yes.
Not today.
Yes.
I love that one.
And I just love that it's a space to unpack, right? I think like therapists are magicians, or they like have this magic toolkit where they just like rah and fix you. But literally, therapists are just giving you a space to unpack, a space to take it all out and lay it out so you can see it. Sometimes you haven't even seen it or don't know what's at the bottom of the suitcase. You've never had the space to unpack, right? And so I remember the first time I went to therapy, I was kind of angry at my therapist, like, so you just gonna listen to me talk the whole time?
Right.
You're not gonna fix me?
Right.
But they're just creating space.
Yes, that's huge too, because I know with mine in particular, I went in kind of with my little script and how I wanted this to go, and not today was that first time where I was just like, I don't have it in me anymore. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm depressed. There's a lot here that I don't even know where to start. And that was like the breakthrough. And I think a lot of people should be okay and feel like that's an okay place to think, an okay thing to say in a space like that. Like, I don't have it in me today. Because so many times, especially for Black women, we don't ever say no. We always say yes. We always say, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Yes, I'll do this. I'll do this. And it's just one time that I'm able to look at another Black woman and say, I can't today. Like, I can't. And she, thank God, was like, I know you can't. Good. Like this.
I'm out. Not to derail, but you said, look at another Black woman. How important
it is important. Okay, wait. Therapy for Black Girls. The title of that poem, I don't know if y'all listen to another podcast called The Read with Crystal and Kid Fury. Crystal, I love her. That's my good girlfriend. She's actually how I found therapy for Black girls, and she,
yes,
and she had mentioned that on her podcast and had told me, or her viewers, I would say, about it. And I had gone on therapyforblackgirls.com, found my therapist there. So it was extremely important for me to have a Black therapist, particularly a Black woman, because I had a bad experience with my first therapist, and he was a Black male. No shade, Khalif.
No, it's fine.
But it wasn't the best experience for my initial one. He didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't good energy that I wanted. So I knew, especially for my personal history, I probably needed a woman, especially a Black woman, to deal with some of the things that I know I was carrying. But depending on your gender, sexuality, or even your own, circumstances, that could depend. Because I know plenty of Black men who are like, no, I still want me a Black woman therapist. And it's like, okay.
What's interesting was like grad school was the first time where I started doing therapy sort of consecutively, where I didn't even do it that long because I kept, something in me just kept stopping me from going. But I had different people trying to find which one I liked. And I eventually ended up with a Black woman towards the end of grad school. And I had this strange feeling, and it's something within me where, because I grew up in a house full of Black women, it was like, okay, this is like I'm talking to somebody in my family. But then after a while, it was like, this is like I'm talking to somebody in my family.
I will say that, yes.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing, because with my therapist, she would say the same thing. She's like, I'm not your mom, right? Like, there's still like, you don't have to view me as your mom. Because again, with my personal things, I'm always worried about other people. I'm always like, how are you doing? I'm that type of person. I'm always checking in, and she's like, no. Like, you need to reframe this relationship. And that is something that I think most people actually deal with once they get comfortable with their therapist. Like, at first it feels like, okay, this is a complete stranger. And then slowly it's like, no, she's not a stranger. She's like, she knows all my business. I need to make sure that I'm like presenting myself nicely in front of company. And it's constantly remembering, like, she's there to service you. You are not there to please her. Like,
True.
You are there to really communicate your needs. You are not there to make yourself look better in front of company. Like, that's not what therapy is about. And that's just something to constantly be mindful of. But it's difficult. It is difficult, especially when you just get comfortable around someone, because you don't want to like let them down. But it's like, your therapist is not, that's not what it's for.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard though. It's hard, trust me.
Let's talk a little bit about the journey to making this happen, the publishing journey.
So, with the book in general, I decided to take a year of like travel. So I went a different location every single month for 12 months by myself. I pretty much all over the States, and then one trip to Mexico. But I just pretty much went everywhere alone. And really use that time to travel to find pieces of me while I was there. Gutsy Women Travel is a poem in there. That's the exact story of that book, is me traveling to different locations, learning a lot about myself in places where I'm alone and I've never been with me before. And I just started writing. And it ended up coming out to like having 200 and something poems, which is so much. And if most people have said, we love it, but it's short, like they want more. Like I don't have 50 poems in there, which honestly, if you're getting a poetry book, most poetry books have 40, 50, but I am very intentional about the things that I do. So I am not someone who just wants to throw a bunch of poems out there, because I felt like the journey that I was on was a very spiritual one, and there needed to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. It wasn't something that everything should just be thrown in there. I needed somebody to see this arc of where I went, and not just like, oh, I like this poem. Oh, I like this poem. And none of it is cohesive. Once I had my final amount that I was like, okay, this feels good. I had already had my editor who worked with me. I had the option of either publishing with a publisher or self-publishing and publishing independently. Now, y'all know I'm about my money. I don't play when it comes to some money, okay? And even more importantly, as an artist, because I do not think Black artists get the recognition, the support, or the finances that they probably deserve with the stuff that they create. There are so many times that our work gets bitten and stolen, so many times that our work gets repurposed, so many times that our work gets pretty much produced without our say, and then we get maybe 20% of the back end. And that's fine if that is your focus, but for me, I have always been about ownership and owning your work and never letting anybody, especially the man, take your stuff. So it was very important for me to self-publish my first one. Now, I don't know what happens in the future. Maybe my second or third, whatever, I am with the publisher. But for the first one out the gate, I needed to do this for me, and I needed to own 100% of my work. So I ended up getting every single thing, my entire manuscript copyrighted before it was even started with the publishing process. So to the state and the government, this is copyrighted. I own it under my pen name, so it's not like nobody can steal it at this point. And that was done before I even went through the publishing route. Now, when I decided to independently publish, I don't think people really communicate about the avenues that you have, but there's Amazon, who's a publisher, who is actually who I decided to go with, and you have Barnes & Noble. I decided to really research both heavy, and I've actually answered questions about like which one is the better probably platform for you to go on. Obviously now with this quarantine, Amazon is your better option because they're sending everything. But the biggest thing that I noticed is that, and I could get this a little bit wrong, so don't quote me, kinda, but Barnes & Noble can sell your Amazon book. Amazon cannot sell your Barnes & Noble book. So it's something like that. It's something interesting like that. And I was like, because I know most people have Amazon Prime, and most people want to go to Amazon before they go to Barnes & Nobles and create an account and check out over there. So from a consumer's perspective, Amazon is probably the better option. I will always, always, always advocate for being an independent publisher, only because you have more ownership over your work. And I think it is huge, especially if you don't know what you're going to be in 10, 20 years. You don't know what piece of art can turn into something. You know, we serve an amazing God, and anything is possible. So I would hate for somebody in Iowa to have 80% of my rights to my manuscript, and I got me a little 20% and can't do nothing with it. I'm gonna be very upset, okay? Right. And just so you know, if you do it independent, you get 100% of the royalties, okay? And if you do it with a publisher, you get maybe 20 to 30%. So now, if you have a publisher, they do most of the work. They do the promo, they do the designing, they put the whole thing together for you. So it's less work for you, but I rather have my hand in everything so that if it's a success or a failure, it's all me and God and nobody else.
This has been such a good conversation, and I would love to close it out with Poetic Moment reading us a little something from More Courage Than Few.
Okay, so y'all know I skydived, right?
What was?
I skydived, okay? So there's a poem in here called Down, and it is like literally, all my Black friends be like, ain't no way in hell I'm skydiving. But let me tell you, as someone who is like, I just been through the ringer, I will recommend it because it was the most freeing. It was the most freeing I have ever felt. It was some spiritual stuff up there. I know it's scary. I know it was the first time in my life I heard complete silence.
Yes.
I'll just get silence.
Yes.
And
it's a kind of quiet that exists nowhere else in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was
when
so
you're up,
quiet.
you hear the engine, like you're like in the same space, but you hear the plane engine. But skydiving, before the like billowing starts to take over, it's just quiet, complete.
Can you hear your own screams?
You know what's crazy? I took a minute to scream because I was just like, oh my God, like I hear God. Like it was just
I started praying.
Wait, you did this too?
Usually I feel like God is way up there, but when I was skydiving, I was like, what's up, God?
Yes. Black girl skydive. Black girl skydive. I'm here for it. Yes. Hashtag. I'm about to hashtag that later. Black girl skydive.
The hashtag of this episode.
Yes. It is, I'm telling you, it sounds scary, but she is absolutely right. It's quiet. You just feel like, wow, I'm really up here with God. Like, hey, wow. How you doing? Yes. Okay, so it's called Down. 48, you know, if you want to follow along. My body fell 13,000 feet from the sky. It was the first time I remembered to breathe and wail a scream that released every fear I had allowed myself to take on, to look at the ground and demand it catch me in its hands carefully. Tell the clouds to make room, for this bird is finally learning to fly. Trust God more than ever before. My bucket list is dwindling. Who would have thought you could start living so young? That panic is just a manifestation of what you're unsure of. That real growth is knowing you can only focus on your part. So play it well and don't be afraid to leap. The world will rejoice when you do. The blessings will pour into you when you remember that looking down at the mountains you've climbed is just as important as looking up.